It's never too early to get a jump start on scouting the opponent, which is what we're going to do today with special guest Mike Gill of ESPN Radio and the host of the BLEAV in Eagles podcast. That's coming your way next on the Locked On Giants podcast.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily New York Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Today's episode of the Locked On Giants podcast is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the games start. Hello, New York Giant fans, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Giants podcast, part of the Locked On podcast family, your team every day. I'm Patricia Traina, and it is Giants-Eagles week. We are officially kicking off Giants-Eagles third time this season. Although this one is going to be much more important. This is for the divisional round. And is the third time going to be a charm for the New York Giants, or will the Eagles prevail? We're going to find out. We're going to get some insight from the gentleman I have on the screen with me. He is Mike Gill, who is the host of the BLEAV in Eagles podcast. He is also the host of his own show down at 97.3 ESPN Radio in Atlantic City. You can catch him every Monday through Friday from 2 to 6 o'clock p.m. Mike, thanks so much for taking the time to come on with me.
No problem, Patricia. Always love Eagles Giants week. This is my favorite week. I know a lot of Eagle fans are enamored with Eagles Cowboys, but for me, Eagles Giants is my favorite week of the year.
It's definitely
week of the year, and now we get three.
Yes, definitely. And this one going to be a big one. So, Mike, I'm going to tap into your knowledge of the Eagles. And I think we got to start off with, they had the bye last week. Where are they right now in terms of health, in terms of, demeanor, mood? What's the general feeling coming out of this bye week for the Eagles?
Well, I mean, this was a team that was healthy all season long. Most teams battled injuries all year. The Eagles were healthy, and they raced out to this great record. And then at the end of the season, right around December, they started to get the injuries to catch up to them. The big one is Jalen Hurts. Nick Sirianni spoke today. He said he is better than he was 2 weeks ago when he started that game against the Giants. He says he continues to improve, and that holding him out of practice last Thursday, this week, that they're going to walk through today, but he should be much better than he was 2 weeks ago. That's obviously huge. If Hurts is not the same, if Hurts is the same player he was in week 18, that's not good. Not a good sign. The other major injury is Lane Johnson. Now, he's going to try to play in the game. He has a torn adductor muscle. He needs surgery. He did not play the last couple of weeks of the year. The Giant game, when they won 48-22, he injured in that game. He left that game. He tried to play with it after that. He left the game against the Giants. He has the Bears. He has not played since. The Eagles' record without Lane Johnson is significantly worse when he does not play. He is a major, major question mark, because if he does play, and he's going to try, how long can he hold up will be a major issue in this game, because if he has to leave that game, Jack Driscoll has not fared very well in the games that he has replaced Lane Johnson. Avonte Maddox is also likely not to play. He is their slot corner. Very, very good. They did get Chauncey Gardner-Johnson back last week, who was their safety. They moved him to corner in the Giant game and kept Reed Blankenship at the safety spot, but that would be a big loss if Maddox can't play, and it's likely he will not play. So that's kind of where they are with the injuries. Josh Sweat, who got hurt he had to get off on a stretcher. He hurt his neck. He will play in the game. Robert Quinn is back. He will play in the game. So some guys back, but some key guys still up in the air.
All right. Sounds like you guys have some big question marks, unlike the Giants, who look like they're going to have all hands on deck this week. At least that's the hope. Mike, coming down the stretch, the Eagles, they had some struggles. They had something like 3 chances to clinch it. They couldn't get it done. They finally got it done against the Giants backup. I know Jalen Hurts was injured for a couple of those games, but did the Eagles play start to drop off because of that Hurts injury, or was there something else that you saw that kind of cooled down their hot streak that they had been on?
Well, Patricia, it's a combination. Defensively, when they lost Maddox and Chauncey Gardner-Johnson at the same time, they played without those guys for 2 weeks. That coincided when they played Dallas and they played the Saints. They had problems in the secondary. Teams were attacking them over the middle a lot more, which is where the slot guy and the safety, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson led the league in interceptions this year, and he missed 6 games. He is a playmaker. Reed Blankenship, he's not costing you games. He did a solid job, but he's not the reason why you're winning games. Chauncey Gardner-Johnson helps you win games because he gets turnovers. He gets interceptions. He makes plays. So without Maddox and Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, they had some problems in coverage, and that was a big factor in the Dallas game. It was a big factor early in the Saints game. They seemed to get it right after that first quarter of the Saints game. And then last week, Gardner-Johnson returned, or 2 weeks ago, I guess that was against Webb and the Giants, which I don't know what you take from that game. Probably not a whole heck of a lot, but I think it coincided with a lot of the injuries. We saw teams this year really struggle with injuries, and I think that was across the league. When you look at records and you're saying, hey, what happened with this team? Well, they had a lot of injuries. The Eagles, they had a lot of their injuries coincided with their late losses.
Hey, Giant fans, have you ever wanted to show the NFL GMs how it's really done? Well, now you can by hooking up with Ultimate Football GM, where you have the final say over every aspect of your roster. Among the decisions you can make include hiring the coaches and coordinators, trades, drafting, and free agency. All of this done in a challenging and realistic game world. Ultimate Football GM is completely free and playable offline. Play on the go, as you want, when you want. We at the Locked On NFL Network have been playing against each other, and we have had an absolute blast. We know you will too when you compete against your friends. So go ahead and get started. Locked On Giants podcast listeners get a 100% free boost to their franchise when using the promo code Locked On in the game store. To download the game, just visit ultimate-gm.com or look it up in the app stores. That's ultimate-gm.com. Ultimate Football GM. Start your dynasty today. Hey, Giant fans, thanks so much for making a Locked On Giants podcast your first listen today. For your second listen, check out the Locked On NFL podcast, bringing you local insights you love to the national spotlight with daily conversations on the biggest NFL stories. Locked On NFL, available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. All right, now I want to talk about a couple of matchups as I see being key to this game, and you can tell me if you agree or disagree and also weigh in on these particular matchups. The first one is going to be the Giants running game against that Eagles run defense. The Eagles run defense has shown that it could be a bit porous. What do you see from that Eagles run defense, and how big of a concern is that Giants rushing offense, which, by the way, includes quarterback Daniel Jones? How big of a concern do you think it is for that Eagles run defense?
The last time they played, I think everybody was worried about Daniel Jones. He had 4 carries for 26 yards in that game. So whatever the Eagles did in that game, they bottled him up. I think Saquon in the 48-22 game, I think he only had like 8 carries in that game. So once Jordan Davis got hurt, they had a really poor day against the Commanders. 3 teams later, yes, the Commanders. They struggled in that game big time. And I think the Eagles and other teams tried to duplicate that. Well, the Eagles went out and got Linval Joseph and Sue. Those 2 guys really helped kind of bring the rushing defense back. They're still not great. They do have Jordan Davis back. The Washington game was a big eye-opener for them that they needed to do something. Teams have tried to run the ball on them, but the Eagles have gotten much better in that spot. So we'll see. Barkley only had 9 carries last game. I was very surprised to see Barkley with 9 carries. If I said Barkley only had 9 carries and you won the game, I'd be pretty surprised. The 17 carries by Daniel Jones is the number that would concern me the most, because the Eagles have had problems containing the quarterbacks this season. The few quarterbacks that have tried to move on them have given them some issues. So I think the Eagles have the Barkley thing kind of bottled up, but it'll be Jones to me that will be the big factor. If he takes off 10, 15 times. He's had double-digit rushing numbers in about 6 games this year. That Eagle game, he only had 4. That's going to have to change.
Yeah, 17 rushing attempts, which was a career high last week against the Vikings, which, just totally blew our mind. Mike, the other matchup that I think I would be concerned with, I believe it's Hassan Reddick versus Evan Neal. Evan Neal has, he's coming back from the knee injury that he had mid-year, has not looked the same. He's had his struggles, had some struggles last week. I got to think that, that's circled in big red, marker on the Eagles' plan of attack.
Reddick is the defending current defensive player of the month in the NFC. He had 2 sacks in 3 straight games. He has been a tremendous addition to this defense. You have him and Neal. I thought Neal played really well in the Viking game, though. I thought that was a big bonus for them because Neal has struggled. I thought he held up pretty well in that Viking game. But this is a different animal with Reddick. And then you got Sweat on the other side, although, obviously Sweat coming back from that injury. We'll see. But Reddick, you're right, is a key to this game. Here's the thing. The Eagles do not blitz. They do not blitz all that much. They'll blitz about 20% of the time. Can Reddick win his one-on-one battles? They also have a lot of pressure. Hargrave, double-digit sacks. Graham, double-digit sacks. Sweat, double-digit sacks. They have other areas they can get you, but that Reddick-Neal matchup, that's when I think the Eagles have to win. Because when the Eagles win, it's because they take advantage of a weak spot on the opposing offensive line, and that's where they piled up 70 sacks this year.
Which I think is, if not a record, it's pretty close to a record.
They were too short from a record. Yeah. It is a franchise record, and this is their team. Reggie White, Clyde Simmons, Jerome Brown. I mean, we know the great defenses of the Eagles past. This team has more sacks than any of them.
Wow, that's amazing when you consider it. Now, I want to go back to Jalen Hurts, if I could. You mentioned that there's confidence that he's a lot better than he was, but I have to think he's still not 100%. And we kind of saw it in the Week 18 game where he didn't really take a lot. He didn't run that much because I guess there was concern of him taking a shot to that shoulder. Do you think we'll see him get back to those design runs more in this one? Or is there still concern that, if he takes a shot the wrong way, he's done?
That's a great question. I think we're all wondering was that game by design? Was it to be vanilla by design, to not show all that much? Did they tell him don't run? Did they not call RPOs? One of the things that hurts that made him an MVP candidate this year, and I don't think he's going to win that award, but I think he played well enough to be in that conversation for long enough, is he made the right decision almost 100% of the time on whether to hand or whether to take off himself. They took that element out of the game against the Giants in Week 18. They didn't even let him make the decision. And I think in this game, if he's playing 2 weeks later, now look, Nick Sirianni spoke at 12:30 on what day is it? Tuesday today. So this is what I'm going off of, that he feels a lot better. I think if Hurts is out there in a playoff game, the playbook is open. They're going to open back the playbook. You will see the RPO, and you will see Jalen Hurts if he has to gut it out. He played in that game 2 weeks ago way more compromised than he will be in this game. So I think you will see Jalen Hurts. Now, is he going to be the Jalen Hurts that was an MVP candidate? I don't know. But I think at least you'll see the playbook be catered to that version of Jalen Hurts. I think the game you saw 2 weeks ago was a very scaled back version of let's just get out of here with a win.
If Jalen Hurts is not that MVP candidate, is the game going to be closer?
Yes.
Is it going to be,
It was close the last game.
Yeah.
And, look.
Against the backups, which is still, wow.
I think if Jalen Hurts is not the Jalen Hurts we got all year, this is a fight. This is a really big fight. The first game they played, I don't know if you agree with me or not, that was one game this year where I watched, and the Eagles had at that point, I think they were 12-1 when they won that game. That was one of the few games that I watched. I said, man, the talent disparity is evident between these two teams. Look, the Giants, I host the show. When they fired Doug Peterson, the guy I wanted was Brian Daboll. I thought he would be a franchise stabilizer. I love what he brings to the table. I think the Giants hit a home run with that. It was the one game this year that I thought the Giants looked outclassed, outcoached, and just out-talented. Now, here we are a couple weeks later, and obviously things change week to week in the NFL. I think that 48-22 game was just, hey, it's a 18-week season. You're going to have days where you just don't look your best. I think that was the day where the Giants just didn't look their best, and the Eagles looked their best. Well, here we are a couple weeks later. Interestingly enough, Patricia, we asked our listeners, who would you rather face in the playoffs? Dallas, Tampa, Seattle, Giants. Overwhelmingly, fans wanted to face the Giants. Well, now they've won, and people seem a little worried.
And I wonder why that is. I think fair enough. It's fair to say that the Giants over the last 4 or 5 weeks have been playing much, much better ball since they did that first meeting against the Eagles. And the record doesn't necessarily show it, but the Giants seem to be on a little bit of a roll here. But, let's talk about another matchup, if we could, that I think is going to make a difference. It's actually going to be different from what we saw in week 18. And I believe I think it was week 14 when they first saw each other. The Giants are getting back Adoree Jackson, their number one cornerback, and Xavier McKinney, who I don't believe they had in that first Eagles matchup game. So the Eagles with Devonta Smith and AJ Brown, those receivers are dangerous. I mean, how much does the return of Adoree Jackson and Xavier McKinney maybe affect what we saw as far as route concepts from the Eagles, or does it affect it?
Well, I'll tell you this. Jackson didn't play in the week 16 game against Minnesota, and Jefferson had 133 yards on 12 catches. This past week in the wild card game, Jackson lined up across from Jefferson 85% of the time, 37 yards on 6 catches. You talk about what's going to be different. That shows you the difference that Adoree Jackson brings. My big question here on that question is kind of a peel of the onion is, will Wink Martindale blitz? He blitzed Jalen Hurts this year in the 2 games 50% of the time. 50. The game against the Vikings, you didn't see that version of Wink Martindale. I think they blitzed like 22% of the time. When they blitzed Jalen Hurts, the results were not good because Hurts gets one-on-one coverage with A.J. Brown, and Brown typically will win that one-on-one. Same with Devonta Smith. Well, will that be different? So I'm very interested to see if Wink Martindale dials the pressure back up and says, hey, I got better corners this time around. Try to beat those guys one-on-one. That, to me, is probably one of the top questions and storylines of this game. Will Wink Martindale pressure Hurts because maybe he's compromised? Let's go after him. And I have better corners. To me, that's the story.
Hey, Giant fans, BetOnline.net is your number one source for football betting info this season. Find all the latest player developments, team matchups, news, podcasts, and in-depth articles and analysis on every game. And BetOnline doesn't stop there. It's your continued source for all your sports wagering information with live betting and up-to-the-minute scores for every sport. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to check in on all your favorite games and events, including NBA, NHL, MMA, boxing, and golf. Head to betonline.net today or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the games start. Dallas Goddard, let's talk about him. The Giants, for whatever the reason, just haven't had much luck defending tight ends, especially in these last several weeks. Goddard is kind of a different animal, brings his own unique spin to the game. What is it about him that makes him so difficult to cover?
He's excellent. He gets himself open. He knows how to find the seams, not to mention you can't put enough attention on him because of the other 2 guys. If you're going to try to, take away the middle of the field, now you got A.J. Brown, now you got Devonta Smith. Last year when the Eagles didn't have that luxury, Devonta Smith was the number 1 guy last year as a rookie, and Goddard still had big days, and that was when he was sharing time with Ertz for half the year. But once Ertz went away, Goddard has taken over. To me, he's right up there with the Kelceys and the Kittles and that group of guys because he's so good after the catch. He is so good at finding a spot on the field and then turning up the field and getting more yards. He breaks tackles. He's fast. He's athletic. He is a do-it-all guy, but he gets lost in the sauce a little bit here because of A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith. Both those guys went over 1,000 yards. Goddard missed some time this year. Had he not missed some times, this is a truly dynamic tight end. You're right. It's a guy on offense. After watching Hawkinson get his yards, I think the middle of the field is something that could be a big kind of a safety blanket, if you will, for Jalen Hurts this week.
How does Goddard respond when he gets bumped at the line of scrimmage?
He's very good. By the way, he's an excellent blocker. When he went out, that was one of the problems that the Eagles had was Jack Stoll, the backup, is a blocking tight end. Grant Calcaterra is a receiving tight end. And it was a tell when one of those guys was in the game what the Eagles were going to do. The one thing with Goddard is he's a very good blocker, and he's very good at getting off the block. He's a good chip guy. He's very good at, just getting a little piece and then breaking off the route. Last week in the Giant game, not last week, the Eagles didn't play that, but the Giant game, when the Giants blitz, they sent the pressure, and you see Goddard get a piece of his man. They ran a little tight end screen right over the top of the blitz, and he can take off and run for 30. They run a lot of screen stuff with Goddard. He's very good at disguising his routes. He's top 3 to 5 tight ends in the league.
Now, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the Eagles running game. And, you have Miles Sanders, who's the number 1 guy, and Boston Scott. That name just creates Giant fans. It causes Giant fans to cringe because it just seems like every time Boston Scott plays the Giants, he has a career game. But let's talk about that Eagles running game. And how do they, just kind of utilize, mix things up a little bit to keep opponents off balance? Are they more of a off tackle, misdirection type, take it to you, right up the gut? I mean, what kind of mixture do you think we'll see?
Well, their running game is very diverse in terms of the RPO because a big part of the running game is Jalen Hurts. He ran for over 700 yards, 748 yards, I think, to be exact. In fact, this game between Hurts and Jones, it is the highest total of yards of 2 quarterbacks have ever had when they've met in a playoff game. Jones 708 and Hurts 748. I think those are numbers I'm going off the top of my head. But these two guys are a big part of why their teams' running game is so successful. And the RPO, the Eagles can run inside. We'll be remiss to talk about the Eagles' running game if we don't mention their offensive line. Their offensive line is the best in football. They dominate at the point of attack. They absolutely demoralize teams. They've done it so many times. When the team is struggling, they'll just go to the line and run the ball. They can run inside with Miles Sanders. They can run inside with Boston Scott. They have Kenny Gainwell who can hit the outside on you. And then, of course, there's Hurts. So this is a very simple but diverse run game, really led by the RPO. And Jalen Hurts is an elite decision maker when it comes to keeping or handing off. And, that's what makes him so difficult. That's why Hurts was an MVP candidate. It's his decision-making made him an MVP candidate. That's what it was. It was his decision-making that allowed him to have this year. I mean, he made the right decision unfathomably almost every single time.
All right. Final question for you, Mike. It's actually a 2-parter. What is the biggest X factor in this game? And give me a prediction.
Well, I think, we talk about the X factor. I go back to what I said about Wink Martindale. You don't blitz 50% of the time and then all of a sudden go 20% of the time and then become that guy. Here in Philly, people can't stand John Gannon because he doesn't blitz. This is a town that had Buddy Ryan and Bud Carson and Jim Johnson, and they sent the house at quarterbacks. Well, John Gannon is back there reading the Sunday paper, man. He doesn't send any pressure, and people don't like it. They would love Wink Martindale here, but to me, the X factor is Martindale's game plan. Is he going to blitz Jalen Hurts, or are they going to sit back in the soft zone and rush 4 and try to make Jalen Hurts beat them in the pass game? I think, to me, that's the best storyline at all. Now, the Giants haven't won in Philly in 9 straight games. Does that factor in? I don't know. We just saw Dallas hadn't won a road game since 93, and they did it the other night pretty convincingly, by the way. But a lot of these Giants have been around. A lot of these Eagles have been around. To me, the Eagles are just a more talented team. We saw it in week 13, 48-22 at New York. The talent was evident. I think Philly's the deepest 53 in the league. The question is, what Jalen Hurts are we getting? So that's the biggest X factor of them all. On the Giants side, Wink Martindale is the X factor for me. And on the Eagles side, it's Jalen Hurts' health. And if he's healthy, I think they win the game. I don't want to say handily, but, 30-20, something like that. Eagles defense is really good. I think the Giants are a little too limited on the outside. Minnesota's biggest faults is their defense is not good. Eagles saw them in week 2 and just exploited them. They're slow on the outside, not enough athletes, don't have enough pass rush. This is a different animal, the Eagle defense. So I think the Eagles have enough. 30-20 Philadelphia.
All right. There you have it, everybody. 30-20 from Mike Gill, host of the BLEAV in Eagles podcast, also host of 97.3 ESPN in Atlantic City. Great town, by the way. I love Atlantic City. Haven't been in a while, but I'll have to get down there in the off season. You can hear them Monday through Friday from 2 o'clock to 6 o'clock. Again, that's 97.3 ESPN Radio. Mike, thank you so much for taking the time to come on with me today.
Absolutely, Patricia. Love Eagles Giants week. Let's have fun.
Definitely. Have fun, and we'll see you at the game on Saturday. All right, Giant fans, that's going to do it for us here on the Locked On Giants podcast. Hope you enjoyed the interview with Mike Gill of 97.3 ESPN Radio. Coming up on Thursday, we have the crossover edition, a big crossover edition, because it's going to be yours truly, along with Locked On Eagles co-hosts Gino Camilleri and Lou DiBiase. I think this is the first time I'm actually doing a crossover show with both the hosts of the opposing team. So that's Thursday night, Locked On Giants Live, Tana and the dog. Drop on by. Dog's going to be fired up. Tana's going to be fired up. I will be fired up, and we will talk all things Giants. And of course, we will also take your questions on the YouTube channel. So we hope we will see you then. Again, thank you so much for making the Locked On Giants podcast your first listen of the day, or watching on YouTube, your first watch of the day. We will see you again tomorrow.